Today we're talking about the book, The Day the Sun Stood Still on Strangers and Aliens, pulp science fiction. Hey, I'm Ben Avery. I am a science fiction fan, a science fiction writer, and I podcast about science fiction and fantasy. And for this episode, I wanted to take a look at this book, and I was not expecting to want to take a look at this book. I did not know what I had in my hands when I pulled this off the shelf at Half Price Books. Now, Half Price Books is a store that's really close to my comic book shop. It's a little bit of a drive to get there, but I do enjoy going there when I get to go into town. And when I do go there, the shelf that I go to first is the anthology shelf. There's about 3.5, maybe 4 shelves of just hardcover anthologies, and there's 2 or 3 shelves of paperback anthologies in the science fiction section, and that's where I like to go first. And I always go to look and see if there's anything new that catches my attention, because I've already bought the things that were there that caught my attention. And there usually isn't. There's some things that I've been interested in maybe buying, but I just haven't gotten around to buying them because I just don't know if it would be, worth the money, worth the time. And so I've just left it on the shelf, and every time I go there, I just look at them and think, no, not this time either. This is a book I had never seen before, and it was the title that caught my attention, The Day the Sun Stood Still, which reminded me of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. But when I pulled it down and was looking at it, the title caught me. I love the cover. I absolutely adore the cover. It's so simple, and it's just got this orange circle here, and then the title just wraps around that circle, and it's very, very simple, but it's very clear. The Day the Sun Stood Still, there's going to be something about a sun in here because there's an orange circle on the cover, and there's not much else on the cover to tell you what's inside. It's just 3 original novellas of science fiction by Paul Anderson, Gordon R. Dickson, Robert Silverberg, with an introduction by Lester Del Rey. And then on the back, it just says jacket design by Carl Wurzer. And so, Carl, nice job. You caught my interest. I did read the inside front cover with the flap on the dust jacket, and it says it's a book club edition. And on the back, there is a bio for all 4 of the people involved in the book. But this did grab my attention. The Day the Sun Stood Still, 3 original novellas of science fiction by Paul Anderson, Gordon R. Dickson, Robert Silverberg, with foreword by Lester Del Rey. Faith wasn't enough. Maybe it should have been, but it wasn't. And when science didn't find any reason to suppose the world was more than atoms and chance, humanity started slipping back into chaos. The world needed a sign, scientific proof, the only sign it could accept, that God lived. Then suddenly, as in biblical times, the sign was there. For a day and a night, the earth moved not around the sun, neither did it rotate. What happened the day the sun stood still? 3 outstanding science fiction authors explore that theme, probing the reaction of modern man when confronted with a miracle, in 3 entirely different but equally absorbing stories never before published. A Chapter of Revelation by Paul Anderson, Thomas the Proclaimer by Robert Silverberg, and Things Which Are Caesar's by Gordon R. Dickson. In doing so, they answer the question posed by science fiction master Lester Del Rey in his foreword: what kind of world might exist where the basis of faith is replaced by certain knowledge? So just on that alone, I spent the $3. $3. I'm thinking to myself, I can't lose, assuming I actually read the book. Okay, so that's where I could lose. And there's plenty of books where I have lost because I bought them and I haven't read them yet. But this one, I brought it home and I started looking a little bit closer. And first of all, I noticed, I should have noticed on the spine, but I noticed in the copyright page that the introduction and the foreword were copyright 1972 by Thomas Nelson Incorporated. That's a Christian book publisher. Now, the authors in this book are not people that I recognize having been vocal about any kind of faith. I do know that Gordon R. Dixon does do some writing where there are faithy themes that are involved. And so I don't think that they were chosen for their apologetics or whatever it might be. You know, this is not where they said, hey, we're going to talk to J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and see if they'll do a story for us. I think they went and found just great science fiction writers to explore this, but this being published by Thomas Nelson, I find that fascinating. And the introduction by Lester Del Rey, you know, does talk about that same kind of thing. There came a time when man was sore troubled and beheld among his kind throughout all the lands a weakening of the faiths. Then appeared a great leader, crying, gird up your loins and be united in a mighty voice at my signal, that there be a sign in the heavens. And the multitudes of diverse faith, even unto 2 billion, hearkened unto him. And at the appointed hour there went up a great shout, asking that a sign be vouchsafed unto them, that the unbelieving should heed. And so the idea, though, is that you have this miraculous event happen in modern day. So this episode is going to be divided into 4 sections. One section being the section where I talk about the book, introduce the book, and talk about how much I love anthologies and love to go to the shelves of anthologies at Half Price Books, where I can find things like this, another themed anthology. Don't forget your spacesuit, dear. I love the idea here. It's all science fiction stories about mothers. Or this anthology, A Time for Everything, shameless plug. It's a book of short stories and 1 or 2 novella-length things inspired by Ecclesiastes 3, edited by some guy named Ben Avery. But okay, shameless plug out of the way here. I love anthologies, but this right here, 3 novellas, $3. It's an anthology. It's like this book was waiting for me, and I was so glad to find it. The question is, of course, will it live up to my excitement? And so that's what we're about to find out. That'll be the other 3 parts of this video, where I'll talk about the 3 different stories. And so, I say today we're going to talk about the day the sun stood still. I just mean today for you. This is going to take me a little bit of time to get through it, not like a month or something like that. Although actually I say that it very well could take me a month, but anyway, I'm excited to talk about this. I'm excited to look into it and just find out what is this all about. So I'm going to play a sounder, some sort of transition. And when I come back, I will have read the first story by Paul Anderson. Okay, I'm back, and I have now read the first novella in The Day the Sun Stood Still, and that is a chapter of Revelation by Paul Anderson. And of all the authors in here, he is probably the one that I know the least amount about. I've seen his name in a lot of different places. I've heard his name in some old-time radio shows, and I do have some anthologies that he appears in, but I haven't read any actual novels by him. And so I didn't know what to expect with this. And I'll just say right now that when I started reading this story, I was a little put off by it. It was a little bit disjointed. And that was because it would go between a short scene and then it would have some sort of basically news writing, news clip, and from just different places all around the world. And then it would go to another scene. And sometimes it was one point of view and then another and then another. And there was one person you kind of follow throughout the whole thing. And then there was a secondary character who had a couple other scenes more than other people. And then there's a couple other people who got like one scene from their POV. But it was a little disjointed at first, and I didn't know who I was supposed to even follow. And the primary guy that you'd be following, he wasn't even in the first scene. He was in the second one, although he was mentioned in the first scene. And the idea is this guy, his name's Lewis, and he just goes on television because he sent a letter to a local news station and said, hey, what we need to do is pray. I have an idea. And they brought him on the TV show to talk about on this chat show about his idea. And his idea is that everyone on this one day at this exact same time, all around the world, let's all pray and ask for a sign, which was kind of hinted to in the dust jacket there. But they do. And there's a sign. And the sign is that the world stops spinning. And So you have people on the sun facing side, you have people on the dark side. The United States is about half and half. China, it's about half and half. And then, some people, they're all just in the dark, and some people, they're all in the light. And then the whole thing, and the reason it has to be as disjointed as it was, and the reason for those newspaper clippings was, first of all, it was a shorthand to be able to drop the exposition on what the world is doing at the time of the story. And what the world is doing at the time of the story is waiting to be destroyed. There's wars and rumors of wars going on, and they're basically on the brink of World War III and on the brink of using nuclear weapons. And one of our main characters is a scientist who works for the government, who is actually working on some weapons, and the weapon he's developing is going to take 5 years to develop. If he's able to develop, it'd be a great deterrent, but the world might be destroyed by then, right? So the other main character is this guy who is just this normal guy who just has this idea, and then he ends up becoming kind of this almost messiah figure, this prophet anyway, that people are looking to him because he's the one who had the idea, and he's the one that when they did the idea, the thing happened. And what does it mean? And I was amazed then. As I got into it, I was able to finally kind of piece together, okay, these are the people we're going to follow. We're going to follow Lewis, his wife. We're going to follow the scientist guy. And then we have these newspaper clippings about what's going on all around the world. And it was a great little story. I'm just going to be honest. I haven't read the other two stories yet, so I don't know if they are, what kind of value they have. But this story was worth the $3 admission that I got. I mean, it was just so thoughtful, so interesting. And it just asks this question of, if a miracle really happened, how would the world react? And the world, the way that they react is that everyone assigns meaning to this. But there's even a whole passage in this where they're talking about the meaning that's been assigned to it. And they're talking about how because of electronic communications, there's able to be one voice just kind of standing up and saying, this is what it means. And people listen to that, hear it, and decide this is what it means. And it just, you have all these different people from around the world, from different religious backgrounds, who are saying it was our belief and it was our version of God who did this. And then the wars don't necessarily stop. And so then you have people who are trying to get this guy, Lewis, to do a speech, tell the world what to think. And they're all telling him what to say. And as they're telling him do a speech, they're also handing him speeches. And so he has multiple people just from the United States government alone telling him, say this, no, say this, say this, say that. And he ends up throwing the speech away and doesn't satisfy anyone. And it kind of leads to the inevitable conclusion that you might expect it to end on. But it begins with that scientist character who can't leave, can't run away from current events, but he's kind of telling his wife to take the kids and go out into the countryside, go out into the mountains where it'll be safer if the bombs do fall. And if I can, I'll come after you, but I do need to be working here and doing my duty. And then it ends with him actually running away with her and leaving all that behind. And they have this moment at the end where they're just kind of looking at the sunset, and they're talking about like, okay, so this miracle happened, what does it mean? And they're kind of trying to figure out what does it mean. And there's this idea that's being bandied about that, God loves the world, and maybe it's the world that he loves and not the people of the world. And he did that so that we would stop fighting, so that the world would be preserved. And there's all sorts of viewpoints that are getting thrown around, and but it ends with him and his wife, and she's just looking at the sunset. And how do we we just don't even notice the actual miracles that are happening around us all the time. So yeah, I was delighted. This was a fun little story. It was a thoughtful story, a thought-provoking story. It does what good science fiction does, which is provokes thought. You have the people who are trying to figure out scientifically what happened. And the thing that kept getting me thinking there is like, okay, just because something has a scientific explanation, that doesn't make it necessarily less miraculous. And I was really hoping he'd get there. He didn't really talk about this in the story, and actually makes me want to write a story like this, But the idea that, okay, so what happened may have been have a completely logical explanation for why the world stopped spinning. But the fact is that it stopped right when they all did the prayer thing, and so just the idea that just because there's a rational explanation for how it happened doesn't necessarily discount the miraculous explanation of why it happened. Yeah, it was very good. I was very surprised. I really enjoyed it. And so I really hope that numbers 2 and 3 are also going to be good. But even if they aren't, Paul Anderson was worth the price of admission. All right, I'm going to play a little bit of a sounder transition thing. And when I come back, I don't know how many days will have gone by, but a few. All right, so I have read the second story in The Day the Sun Stood Still. And I have to say, this one wasn't as fun as Paul Anderson's story. This one was called Thomas the Proclaimer. It was written by Robert Silverberg. What was interesting was how these two stories, which are both about people who made the call to the whole world to pray for a sign, and the sign being that the earth stops and doesn't spin around the sun. And what's interesting is how different they were, but also how the same they were. They both were trying to go for that global scope. They both really focused in on the guy who kind of put out the call to everyone. But what was interesting to me about Thomas the Proclaimer was to see just how everyone in the world interpreted what happened in a different way. It was clear that something had happened, but some people were saying, you have proof almost that God exists because everyone called out to him and asked him to stop the earth. And you have some people who are saying, well, it was coincidence. You have some people who are saying, well, it was actually aliens. Some people who are saying it was telekinesis, and everyone was just because everyone was using their brain. Some people were saying that it was a trick. Some people were saying it's tricked by the devil, okay? And so it was just kind of fascinating to see this. And you had a character who was an atheist who's looking at this, and he's like, what do I do? What do I do in the face of this? And so he has to adjust his belief system, but then he has to adjust his belief system and still kind of take things into account his way. And then you have the different churches, and what's interesting about that is basically the churches kind of fall apart because they aren't sure what to do with this. They don't know what to do. And so the church is closed for a couple of days because they are avoiding riots and looters and that kind of thing. And then it kind of falls apart because everyone's interpreting things in a different way. And some people are interpreting it as this is what God is saying this. Some people are interpreting it as God is saying he's there for us and he cares for us. And some people are interpreting it as the end is coming. And so you have that going on. And then you also have the character of Thomas, who is dealing with all this. And the character of Thomas is the one who it's almost a Moses Aaron kind of a thing. Thomas being Aaron, where he's able to speak clearly, but then you have someone else who's kind of behind him. And so you have a dynamic there where the guy who's behind him is kind of pushing him into things. Thomas gets messages from God and actually speaks to God and hears from God, but he doesn't necessarily want to. And he's not a true believer. Even though he's getting these messages from God, he's not a true believer in what he's doing. And so both of these stories have the person who made the call ends up with a fate that is to be expected in a story that just can't have a happy ending, So anyway, it was interesting. Not as fun as the first one, but it was interesting. And I really did like the way it approached how the church looks at this one thing, but everyone has all these very different interpretations of what this one thing means. I've only read 2/3 of this book, and I'm already saying this is the best $3 I've spent in a long, long time. I mean, as of right now, each story is $1.50. And as of right now, each story was well worth that $1.50. If I paid $2-3 on Kindle for stories of this caliber that got me thinking and got me interested, and it's engaging that faith side of me. But because these are not men who are approaching their writing from that Christian spectrum. If they had gone after 3 different writers who were known for faith-based work, it wouldn't have been, I think, as interesting, and it wouldn't have been as emotionally and spiritually diverse. Just keep coming back to, I wish I knew the story behind this. And I don't know, maybe I'll try and reach out to Robert Silverberg, but I found his website, and that's why I say maybe. I found his website. I don't know if I'm going to try that or not. That's it for Thomas the Proclaimer. That's it for Robert Silverberg in this volume. And in a couple more days, might be another week, I don't know, I'll be back to talk about the third and final portion, Things Which Are Caesar's by Gordon R. Dickson. All right, I finished it. I read the third part. I read Things Which Are Caesar's, and it's written by Gordon R. Dickson, who I'm a fan. I have another book by Gordon Dickson, The Way of the Pilgrim. I think it's an omnibus edition of 2 different books that I was looking for a really long time. Finally found it at a used bookstore year and a half ago. I can't wait to pick that book up and just start reading it, because this third part of this book, $3, $1 per story, each one by far great value for my buck. This is better than a McDonald's value meal right here. I mean, it's more edifying, it's more fulfilling, and I don't even know what a McDonald's value meal costs anymore, but I'm pretty sure it's not $3. This third part, this Things Which Are Caesar's, the writing was lyrical, but the story itself was different than the other two, because they both try to be, grand in scope and actually tried to explore what the whole world was like, and, giving snippets here and there and that sort of thing. This just stayed in one location. It was a very small location. It was a field where people were setting up camp, and they had to have they had to have licenses to be able to set up camp there, and it just felt very 70s to me. It felt like communal living was happening here during or right after this event where everyone prayed together and asked for a sign, and the sun stood still. The earth stopped spinning. So it still was a global event, but it was not global scope. It was very limited scope. It could have been a stage play, and maybe it should have been a stage play. And honestly, maybe it had been a stage play at one point. But it was fascinating. The main idea behind it was kind of, even a miracle will be forgotten, and probably not change anyone, because people don't change. And then by the end, you see a couple people who do change, not because of the miracle, but because of what they did for each other. And it just got me thinking about how, and I don't know if he intended me to think this way, but it got me thinking about how, in some ways, these days, we are the sign that God gives to the world. We are that sign that is just flashing, God loves you. And our actions make the difference. Now, that is something he was trying to say, is our actions make the difference. And it comes down to, again, all 3 of these stories, broad scope, all 3 of these stories had that one prompt to follow. All 3 of these stories had a character who died a martyr's death. And it just, yeah. But the other thing that all 3 of these stories did was everyone interpreted it differently, which totally makes sense. If something like that were to happen in our world today, there would be the people who would be like, the sun stopped. Well, what's the scientific explanation, and things like that? And it's just, the sun stopped. Well, obviously it is my version of what I believe that caused this to happen. And there can only be one true explanation. So anyway, there is just so much stuffed into this book. And wow, that's just very eloquent, isn't it? Yes, I am a wordsmith. There's so much stuffed into here, but there was just a lot of material to just mull over and think about. I mean, just the ideas that it was presenting. And the other interesting thing about this is, as I mentioned before, it was published by Thomas Nelson, but this is a bold book to publish. This is a book that doesn't necessarily embrace evangelical Christianity. This was a risky publishing endeavor, and I'm really, really curious about it. But the only people connected to it are Lester Del Rey, Paul Anderson, Gordon Dixon, and Robert Silverberg. And I don't know if I'm going to ever have a chance to ask them anything about this. And I shouldn't say that. I do know there's a possibility of having a chance to ask like Robert Silverberg about this, because his website still exists and there's a contact. I just don't know if I'm going to get a chance to get an answer from anyone about this. I would love to find out more, though. Okay, so I had intended actually to do another part where I just kind of talk about the book in general, but I think that this is going to serve that purpose. Until next time, I do want to just say this is worth seeking out, and they do have a print-on-demand KDP Amazon Publishing version out there, or something along those lines. I don't know if it's actually KDP, but it's available through Amazon. I do not know how legitimate their claim to the printing of the book is. I don't know if this is something that's in public domain, or if it is something that they actually sought out permission to reprint this book. But I will say this: if you can find it for $3, get it, read it. If you like classic science fiction, if you like thoughtful science fiction, then this is for you. This right here is for you. Okay, past Ben. Sorry to interrupt you there. This is future Ben, just checking in on you. Actually, to you, I'm future Ben. To me right now, I'm present Ben. And to you, the viewer, I'm past Ben, talking to double past Ben, but all that doesn't matter. What matters is, past Ben, you recorded a great ending. It was wonderful. It was great. Not going to use it though. Why? Because after I finished recording that ending to that video, I went ahead and said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and I am going to email Robert Silverberg and just see if I can get a little bit of an answer of the genesis of this book. Who initiated it? Was it the publisher? Was it Lester Del Rey? Was it somebody else? It's not listed here because the book doesn't say. It doesn't say. And this morning I woke up to an answer. I was so excited. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how active the website was. I didn't know how active he was as far as email and interaction with readers and that sort of thing. His answer is very, very simple, very, very short. But I just asked him, can you give me some background on this? And he said that he initiated it, proposed it to the publisher, his words, invited my friend Lester Del Rey to set the theme, asked Paul and Gordy to join in writing stories for it. And that was his answer. And so I did send a follow-up email to him just saying how much I enjoyed it, how much I enjoyed the concept and the challenge, how much I enjoyed the end results, the story themselves, but also how much I enjoyed just the thoughtfulness of it and the thoughts that it provoked with me, because it was thought-provoking. Yeah. So the day the sun stood still. Highly recommended. I'm not doing this as an is it worth reading, but is it worth reading? It is, yes, worth reading. And so until next time, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me. Thank you so much for joining me here and just sharing in my opportunity to be enthusiastic about something that I read. I hope you find something that you can be enthusiastic about as well, something that causes you to have enjoyment and enlightenment. And yeah, which is what I ask for my science fiction. And this one delivered. So until next time, thanks for watching. Hit like, hit subscribe. Check us out over on the podcast, strangersandaliens.com, Facebook, facebook.com/strangersandaliens, or youtube.com/strangersandaliens. And until next time, I want to wish you in your journeys, wherever you're going, however you're getting there, and however long the day may be, Godspeed.